The tunnel is 4 feet wide and half a mile long, and you are somewhere in the middle of it at 2:17 a.m., and the Soviet military telephone cable is 18 inches above your head, and every conversation between Moscow and Warsaw and Bucharest and the East German High Command is running through it right now at this exact moment, and none of the people having those conversations know you are here. You have been underground for 6 hours. The tunnel runs from a fake U.S. Air Force radar warehouse in the Alt-Klinicke district of West Berlin, across the border that exists on every map and in the mind of every soldier on both sides of it, and into the Soviet sector of East Berlin. The Soviet military headquarters is 1,800 feet from where you are lying on your stomach in a steel-lined shaft 4 feet in diameter, with a microphone amplifier in your hands and the weight of 30 feet of Berlin earth above you. You are not supposed to be here. Nobody is supposed to be here. That is the point. The tap is active. The Soviet military's most sensitive telephone cables, the ones carrying encrypted traffic between the Kremlin and every Soviet military installation in Eastern Europe, are being intercepted in real time by equipment in a room that is technically still in West Berlin by 11 inches. 11 inches. That is the margin between the free world and everything that follows if the Soviets find you. You listen to the cable humming above your head, and you count your own heartbeats, and you do not move. Before I tell you how this happened, and how close it came to the worst intelligence disaster of the Cold War, I need to ask you something. Operation Gold was the largest CIA covert operation of the Cold War, a joint mission with British MI6, running from 1954 to 1956. The CIA dug a tunnel under the Iron Curtain, tapped the Soviet military's most sensitive telephone cables, and intercepted over 400,000 conversations. CIA Director Alan Dulles called it one of the most valuable and daring projects ever undertaken. Here is my question. The Soviets knew about this tunnel from day one. They knew because a British mole told them. So why did they let it run for nearly a year before shutting it down? Comment below. Because the answer reveals something about how intelligence actually works that no textbook has ever explained correctly. It starts not in Berlin. It starts in Vienna, in 1948, in a city divided the same way Berlin is divided. American sector, British sector, French sector, Soviet sector. And in the mind of a British intelligence officer named Peter Lunn, who has been staring at a map of the Soviet sector's telephone infrastructure and thinking about what is running through the cables beneath the streets. What is running through the cables beneath the streets is everything. Every order from Moscow to the Soviet forces in Austria. Every communication between the Soviet High Command and the satellite states they are in the process of consolidating. Every personnel movement, every supply requisition, every military disposition of every Soviet unit in Central Europe, all of it traveling through underground telephone cables that were built before the war and that nobody thought to protect because nobody imagined that an opposing intelligence service would be willing to dig for them. Lund brings the idea to the CIA's Berlin operations base. The CIA's Berlin operations base brings it to Langley. Langley brings it to CIA Director Alan Dulles, an old OSS spy master who spent the Second World War running agents into occupied Europe and who recognizes a good operation when he sees one. Dulles approves it in January 1954. The man he assigns to build it is William King Harvey, CIA officer, former FBI, built like a bear and thinks like a surgeon. His colleagues call him America's James Bond. His enemies, when they eventually discover what he has done, will call him something considerably less complimentary. Harvey looks at the map of Berlin and starts measuring. The cover is a U.S. Air Force radar installation and warehouse in the Alt-Klinicke district of West Berlin. This is not unusual. There are American military installations all over West Berlin. The Soviets monitor them as a matter of institutional habit and find nothing worth elevating to concern. The Americans are building something. The Americans are always building something in West Berlin. The perimeter fence goes up. The warehouse goes up. The radar equipment is installed on the roof because the radar equipment needs to be visible to be believed. What is not visible is what is happening in the basement. The basement of the fake radar warehouse is where the tunnel begins. 300 American soldiers and CIA officers, all of them holding top-secret clearances, all of them formally prohibited from discussing the operation with anyone outside the specific cleared circle, all of them working in rotating shifts so that the activity level above ground never spikes high enough to attract attention, begin digging east, toward the Soviet sector, toward the cables. They remove 3,100 tons of soil. This is enough earth to fill 20 average American living rooms. They cannot leave it on the surface because the surface is watched. They store it in the basement of the fake warehouse and in adjacent buildings because there is nowhere else for 3,100 tons of Berlin earth to go when you are conducting an operation that officially does not exist. They use 125 tons of steel plate to line the tunnel walls. They use 1,000 cubic yards of grout to seal it against groundwater. They built a refrigeration system inside the tunnel because the heat from the interception equipment will warm the earth above it, and the Soviets will notice a warm patch of ground in East Berlin in the middle of winter and ask what is warming it. They think of everything. They built the refrigeration system. They miss one thing. The tunnel reaches the Soviet cable in early 1955. The distance from the start of the tunnel to the Soviet cable is 1,800 feet, which is slightly more than a third of a mile, which is nothing on a map and everything underground. The cable carries 3 distinct lines: a Soviet military telephone line running from Moscow through Warsaw to the Soviet military command in East Berlin, a KGB communications line running parallel to the military line, a third line carrying traffic between the Soviet and East German governments. The CIA taps all 3. The interception room is built at the western end of the tunnel, technically still in West Berlin by 11 inches. A legal technicality that means nothing to the Soviets but everything to the lawyers at Langley who have been asked to certify the operation's compliance with American law. The room contains racks of recording equipment. The equipment records continuously. The recordings are flown to Washington and London daily. An army of analysts, 317 people at peak operation, works around the clock transcribing, translating, and assessing the intercepted traffic. What they find inside the cables is everything they hoped for and more. They find the identities of Soviet intelligence officers operating undercover in Western Europe. They find the early warning indicators of the Soviet establishment of an East German national army, the Nationale Volksarmee, before it is publicly announced. They find the poor condition of East German railways, which tells them something important about Soviet logistical capacity. They find, most critically, that the Soviet military's combat readiness in Europe is significantly lower than Western intelligence has been estimating. This last finding changes the entire Western strategic calculation. For 11 months and 11 days, the most sensitive Soviet military communications in Europe run through a tap installed by 300 Americans in a fake radar warehouse in the Alt-Glienicke district of West Berlin. Over 400,000 conversations intercepted. Thousands of intelligence reports were produced. And the entire time, Moscow knows. George Blake was 34 years old in 1954. He is a British MI6 officer stationed in Berlin. He speaks Russian, German, Korean, and Dutch. He has worked for British intelligence since the end of the Second World War. He was captured by North Korean forces in 1950 when Seoul fell and held for 3 years, during which time he secretly converted to Marxism. After his release, he rejoined MI6 and was sent back to Berlin, where he immediately began passing everything he knew to the KGB. He was in the room when Operation Gold was planned. He passed the complete operational details, the tunnel's location, its depth, its target cables, the cover installation, the timeline, to the KGB in late 1953, before the first shovel of Berlin earth was moved. The KGB receives the information and faces a problem that has no clean solution. If they act on the intelligence immediately, if they arrest the construction teams or expose the operation publicly, they reveal that they have a source inside British intelligence. George Blake will be identified and lost. The Soviets will have traded a long-term penetration asset inside MI6 for the short-term satisfaction of shutting down a tunnel operation that has not yet produced any intelligence. This is not a trade the KGB is willing to make, so they make the other choice. They let the tunnel run. They monitor it. They feed it. They route genuinely secret material through the tapped cables while quietly routing their most sensitive traffic through other channels that the CIA does not know exist. The intelligence the CIA collects from the tunnel is real. It is valuable. It changes Western strategic assessments. And simultaneously, the most important Soviet military decisions, the ones the CIA most needs to know about, are being made on lines that are not tapped because the Soviets know which lines are tapped. The CIA is eavesdropping on the Soviet Union's second tier. The Soviets are letting them. This is how intelligence actually works. Not the spy against the spy. The institution against the institution. The calculation against the calculation. The willingness to absorb a loss to protect something more valuable than the thing being lost. The tunnel runs for 11 months and 11 days. In April 1956, a cable repair crew from the Soviet military arrived at a section of the East Berlin Street directly above the tunnel. They are repairing the flooding damage. The flooding is real. Spring meltwater has been seeping into the tunnel, and the CIA's refrigeration system has not been able to manage the volume. The cable crew digs. They find the tunnel. The discovery is announced publicly by the Soviets 3 days later. They invite the international press into East Berlin to photograph the tunnel. They present it as evidence of American criminal espionage. They call it a provocation. They use the word imperialist 17 times in the initial press release. The international press photographs the tunnel. The tunnel is 4 feet wide and half a mile long, and lined with American steel plate and sophisticated interception equipment, and it is a masterpiece of engineering, and everybody who sees it knows it. The press coverage is almost uniformly admiring of the technical achievement. The Soviets have planned a propaganda victory and gotten a diplomatic embarrassment. George Blake is not exposed. He continues working for British intelligence for another 5 years. He is eventually caught in 1961 through a source completely unrelated to Operation Gold. He is sentenced to 42 years in prison, the longest sentence ever handed down by a British court at that time. He escapes from Wormwood Scrubs prison in 1966 with the help of a peace activist who throws a rope ladder over the wall. He reaches Moscow. He lived there until he died in 2020 at the age of 98. What Operation Gold actually produced is still debated. The CIA's position is that the intercepted intelligence was genuine and valuable, that it changed Western strategic assessments, that it produced actionable intelligence on Soviet military capabilities, and that the existence of the tunnel for 11 months represents one of the most significant technical intelligence achievements of the Cold War. The KGB's position, expressed in internal documents that became available after the Soviet collapse, is that they managed the operation successfully, that they protected their most sensitive communications throughout, and that the intelligence the CIA received, while genuinely valuable, was carefully curated to exclude anything that would give the West a decisive advantage. Both positions are probably correct. This is the thing about intelligence that the recruiting poster does not tell you, and that the movie cannot quite represent accurately. There is no clean win. There is no moment where you have all the information and the other side has none. There is only the permanent negotiation between what you know and what they know you know, and what they know you think they know, and what you know they know you think they know. A hall of mirrors with no exit, and no reliable floor, and no way to know with certainty whether the ground you are standing on is solid or whether it was placed there by the person you are trying to outthink. 300 Americans dug half a mile under the Iron Curtain. They tapped the Soviet military's most sensitive cables. They intercepted 400,000 conversations. And the entire time, a 34-year-old British officer was sitting in an intelligence conference room in London, knowing exactly what they were doing and ensuring Moscow was aware of it as well. The tunnel was real. The intelligence was real. The mole was real. Everything was real. And nothing was clean, and the CIA director called it one of the most daring projects ever undertaken, and he was right, and the KGB officer who managed Blake's intelligence called it one of the most successful deceptions of the Cold War, and he was also right. Both things, at the same time, in the same tunnel. You are back in the tunnel, not 1956, now. A different tunnel in a different city, under a different adversary's communications infrastructure, but the same logic, the same steel walls, the same earth above you, the same cable humming 18 inches above your head. The work has not changed. The adversary has changed. The technology has changed. The cables are fiber now, not copper. The encryption is quantum resistant, not analog. The traffic volume is 10,000 times what it was in 1956. But the logic is identical. You dig toward their cables. You tap them. You listen. And somewhere on the other side of the Iron Curtain, or whatever the Iron Curtain is called now, an officer in an intelligence service that has been doing this longer than yours has been doing it sits in a conference room, knowing exactly what you are doing, and ensuring that his service is aware of it too, or not. You will not know which one it is for 40 years, if you find out at all. The cable hums above your head. You do not move. Continue.